Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to wrap up our unit on the 1980s. We'll be covering the AIDS crisis, and you might remember in my last video, I hinted we were going to spend some time talking about events during Reagan's presidency that still have an impact on us still today. So we're going to get started with our essential question. Why do you think President Reagan was slow to respond to AIDS? Please make sure you write down that question in your notes. Let us start by defining our terms. So AIDS is actually an acronym. It stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome, and this is a virus which caused the death of tens of thousands of people during the 1980s. This virus weakens and eventually destroys the immune system so badly that a person can no longer fight even very minor infections. AIDS spreads through direct contact with blood and through sex. So the people who became infected with AIDS were mostly found to be in three groups, mostly gay men, but also drug users who shared their needles with other people, and people for whatever reason needed a blood transfusion. Now, people actually called this disease gay plague or gay cancer before scientists knew what AIDS was. Otherwise, healthy gay men in queer communities of LA, San Francisco, and New York City were just dying very suddenly. Their symptoms looked like cancer, which also breaks down the body's immune system. And so while all these gay men were dying at a staggering rate, you would hope that the president would do something to help, right? Either by using his platform to educate the public or direct funding to research on AIDS to maybe try and develop a cure. Unfortunately, Reagan did very, very little. In fact, he never publicly said the word AIDS during his first term or his first 4 years as president. We will look into this further in class, but I do want to share a quote with you from an advisor of Reagan's. He said, "Homosexuals have declared war upon nature, and now nature is extracting an awful retribution." This homophobia and discrimination against the LGBT community caused Reagan and his team to just ignore AIDS and really do nothing to stop the disease from progressing and killing more people. And while our government response was pretty pathetic, the AIDS crisis is also an amazing example of how people in communities can step up and do the work when government fails to help. People are not just going to sit back and take this disease. So activists did everything from educating people about the disease and how to reduce the risk of getting it by having safer sex. They also built community centers that cared for people who were infected. Hospitals sometimes refused to see AIDS patients, so these care centers were really needed. Activists also fought discrimination in our culture and our laws. So it was common for someone with AIDS to be kicked out of their house if the landlord found out they had AIDS, or even to lose their job. Activists protested for years for increased government funding for a treatment for AIDS. Now, there is still no cure for AIDS, but treatment exists now to help people manage the disease because of their work. One of the most impressive public art installations in the world came out of this crisis. You're looking at the AIDS Memorial Quilt, and it is in remembrance of those who died of AIDS in America. Every single square you see on the quilt is a memory of somebody who died. These squares are stitched together to create this massive quilt that stretches really farther than the eye can see. It is a strong visual symbol, and it punches you in the gut with just kind of seeing the scope of how many people died of this disease. In a little bit, we're going to examine the interactive AIDS Memorial Quilt in class so we can see these individual squares more in detail. I will end today's lesson by highlighting the work of a group called ACT UP. This is the most active group who fought to develop a cure for AIDS and to help improve the lives of people living with this disease. They led very many protests to keep the issue of AIDS visible, and their slogan, "Silence equals death," warns about what happens when the government fails to acknowledge the AIDS crisis. Our video lesson is complete. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check directions on what we will do next to dive deeper into this issue. See y'all next time.